Ah, the shotgun. For when you need to quell a prison riot, perform a gain hit, end grunge, or execute a heretic. Even in 40k, people find a use for this age-old weapon. Hello, everyone. Today we're talking about shotguns in 40k, specifically the ones used in 40k Darktide, as by the time this video is out, the unlocked and loaded update should be released, and I'll be killing heretics with my favorite weapon, the shotgun. That does beg the question, why in a universe of las guns, bolters, plasma guns, and melter rifles, are shotguns even needed? That's what we're going to answer today, while also talking about if Fatshark nailed how shotguns work. And surprisingly, they did a better job than you think. First off, why are shotguns in 40k? The simple answer is, just like the quote said in the intro, they're easy to use, reliable, cheap, versatile, and to quote Clint Smith, at the right range with the right load, will physically remove a chunk of flesh off your opponent and throw that flesh on the floor. Now, when you're in the Imperial Guard, there are many weapons that can achieve a similar result. However, there is a whole galaxy full of poor people that aren't military. There go, they do not receive military equipment, nor even quality equipment. Thus, the shotgun comes in. Even the most simple of manufactorums that are incapable of producing laser weapons can easily manufacture shotguns. And considering most conflicts in these areas will be close quarters, this is a perfect weapon for law enforcement and gang members alike. It helps that this weapon platform is so simple, you can be proficient with it even if you can't read. Gangsters will use it as the weapon excels in close quarters of the sewers, hab blocks, and alleyways, where you might need to turn a human into a walking donut over who gets the stolen corpse starch. Now, you would think the Arbites, being law enforcement, they would use shotguns for less lethal applications. In 40k, there is no less lethal for shotguns, just less collateral damage. Nevertheless, having those options is what makes the Arbites partial to this weapon platform, on top of the crowd clearing potential it has. Then there's the Voidsmen at Arms. They're security for naval ships, and they will use shotguns because of its low penetration, preventing any unwanted damage from occurring to the ship. Overall, if you're firing close, want to drop your foe in one hit, or not put too many unnecessary holes in the walls while working on a budget, the shotgun is for you. But what makes a shotgun unique to the other weapons one can use? For those of you who aren't gun savvy, a shotgun is a firearm that typically has a smooth bore barrel. This means there are no grooves in the barrel, unlike with pistols and rifles. This is because shotguns can be loaded with a shell full of shot. Shot is a bunch of pellets with sizes varying from BBs to being large enough to load a flintlock pistol. The number of shot in a shell can vary from 6 to dozens. What this does is create a spread pattern, as once the shot leaves the barrel upon being fired, it will begin to dissipate into a larger area the further it goes. This means your target can experience being shot multiple times and you only had to pull the trigger once. This is just the beginning, as you may want more pellets and have a wire spread so you can hit multiple targets. The limit is how much you want to put pellets into your shell. Shot isn't even the only ammunition type, as they're slugs, where instead of say 9 pellets that weigh an ounce, you have one giant slug that has the same weight. To give you some context, this slug is equivalent in weight to say 3 9mm bullets, or 7 5.56 bullets. But instead of going fast and zipping through a body like the previous mentioned can, a slug has the potential to have major penetration into soft targets while dumping most of its energy straight into the target, splintering bone and mulching organs, giving it its iconic stopping power. Of course, 40k has to ramp it up by including homing shells that can track the target and hit them if they're in a crowd, but not anyone else. Or the gas shells that can kill a target soon after contact, but ensures you don't damage any equipment or machinery that might be nearby. And we haven't even touched shells used for Astartes, because that's a different video for a different day. Right now, we're focusing on the shotguns in Darktide, which are used by humans and Ogryns. Now, before I get started with talking about these shotguns, real quick, I need to mention pellets per shell. Each shell has a set number of pellets, and the largest factor that determines the number is the size of the pellets. However, when I mention the number of pellets, that number could be off more or less a couple pellets. To keep it simple, different companies use different components that lead to a different amount of pellets in the shell. For now, I am merely going off what is most likely being used and what would make sense for the intended roles of these shotguns. Let's start with the veteran shotguns. And first up is the Lawbreeder shotgun. And it is geared up for crowd control by being semi-auto, carrying 8 to 12 shells, and firing a solid 13 pellets. Assuming we're using 12 gauge 2 3/4 inch shells to make the shell capacity halfway possible, then this shotgun is loaded with single-aught buckshot with a pellet diameter of 0.32. What makes this well suited, however, is a special shell which shoots the pellets in a horizontal line, making it easier than ever to size through mutants like a field of wheat. Against large groups of unarmored targets, this shot will perform beautifully. Something else to take note of, and I'm really impressed with Fatshark, is the range. In most games after 10 meters, your shotgun is borderline useless. In Darktide at 40 meters with the Lawbreeder, your spread is still torso size, which is accurate to what you can expect in real life at this range. That is, however, when you're aiming down sights. We'll talk about the hip fire later. Also, there's still drawbacks, and they're twofold. First, while Single-Lot Buck isn't nothing to sneeze at, it will struggle with body armor, so be ready for follow-up shots or get good at aiming for the head. Second, while I was just praising the shotgun for maintaining a tight spread at distance, unless you're using a special shell which you can only load and shoot one at a time, you don't have any other reliable way of having that crowd clearing spread. Now for realism, while we don't have a shell that works in the way the Lawbreeder has, there is a choke known as the duckbill choke, which is made for this exact purpose, though it does look a little goofy, so it was a good call to make it a shell you can load. Shell capacity is a little high, but unreasonable. Shot type is justifiable, large enough to drop a heretic, but small enough to squeeze in a few more pellets per shot. It works. Next up is Agrippina shotgun. This is more of what you would expect in a military combat shotgun, just upscaled slightly. Upscaled in the sense this shotgun is shooting shells with 7 pellets, meaning we're loaded with triple-lot buckshot with pellets coming in at 0.36 inches in diameter, only 113% larger than single-lot shot. So instead of us wanting to take out groups, we just want to turn that one guy in particular's torso into applesauce. Or what if you believe size matters? Well, this shotgun has just a solution, with this special shell being a slug. As I mentioned earlier, this thing is brutal, and even at 50 plus meters will hit where you aim as intended. Assuming your intention was to scoop out the back of the heretic skull, this shotgun is an elite killer. Can't get close? Pop him from afar with a slug. A maniac charging you? Put him on his ass with a slug and finish him with a double tap. A military will use this type of shotgun to breach a door, so use it to breach the heretic's door that leads them to the afterlife. In terms of realism, everything I said before about the Lawbreeder applies here. Only difference is it looks like at the end of the tube is an extension for the magazine tube, which could make sense why it's at such a high capacity. Not to mention there are semi-auto shotguns that can do ghost loading, which means to put an extra shell underneath the gate, like the M4 Benelli. So you can get away with 12. Moving on, let's take a look at the Cantrell shotgun. This beast of a looking shotgun is slightly larger than a Lawbreeder, but carries less shells. However, the barrels are the same gauge. This means this shotgun in particular is carrying 3-inch shells, which means more powder and pellets, and it shows with an eye-watering 18 pellets of single-lot buckshot. Having that extra powder also helps, as your pellets have so much ass behind them that they will over-penetrate the first target and slam right into the one behind them. The special shell the Cantrell has is one of the coolest, a Dragon's Breath round, aptly named because it shoots fire. Because it wouldn't be 40k if you couldn't throw fire at someone from really far away. To get this fire instead of pellets, it carries magnesium shards in the shell. I've seen many people use this type of shell, but in reality, aside from burning your field down, it's kind of a novelty item, and it shows in the game with its damage. Lastly, for veterans, we have the Iron Helm Hacker Mark IV Assault Shotgun, a 10-gauge double-barrel shotgun carrying 3.5-inch shells with 16 pellets of double-aught buckshot apiece. I need you to understand, when you fire both barrels, you are sending a quarter pound of lead into your target. You are firing 4 12-gauge slugs worth of lead at once. This shotgun is what Clint Smith meant when he said it will tear a chunk of shit out of your opponent and throw it on the floor. What's the tactical purpose? That's a stupid question. Your question should be, do I want that thing to no longer exist? If yes, apply both barrels directly to the forehead. Crowds? Who cares? These shells will cut down crowds 4 bodies deep. This yardstick of metal, wood, and lead will flip the light switch on any enemy in one go, minus the bulwark and crusher. You might think this gun can't be used by a man, but you're wrong. For $1,000, I could buy a shotgun like this and have mechanically the same shotgun. In short, does it kill? By the throne, it murders. Let's move on to the Ogryn Shotguns. Now, mechanically, the Ogryn Shotguns work a bit differently. They're magazine-fed shotguns that are select fire, meaning they can either fire in bursts or in full auto. While normal Ogryns' heads hurt at the thought of a gun firing in 2 ways, some of these Ogryns here have the bonehead implant, meaning they only sometimes forget there's an alternate way to fire their favorite boomstick. These shotguns also have bayonets on them, as it turns out, giving a 10-foot-tall stack of muscle a knife to cut their enemy's head to gooch can be pretty effective. Something else to note is the size of these shotguns. Since Ogryn vary from 8'4" to 10 feet tall, they need a gun to match. And even the 10-gauge hacker ain't gonna cut it. That's where we have the Ripper guns. Now, if 10-gauge is considered small for these guys, what is appropriate? How about the 4-gauge? Here's a comparison of 10-gauge and 4-gauge. As you can see, that's going to have some weight to it, and while in our universe we have the KS-23 of the same gauge and can be fired by normal people, the thought of carrying a full auto version and carrying dozens of shells and multiple magazines seems challenging. Considering you don't see people running around with a 16-pound AA-12 or 32-round drum mag, which is in 12 gauge, I feel safe making that statement. But in Ogryn, hell yeah, brother. Let's turn mutants into paste. By giving them a gun that's the hate child of a threesome with the bayonet attachment of a Winchester 1897, full auto drum mag of the AA-12, and a huge fuck-off 4-gauge of the KS-23. The Ripper gun. And the first Ripper gun is the Faux Ren Mark V. The Mark V has a 3-shot burst from the hip, a 2-shot burst braced, and is capable of firing full auto. It's firing 7 pellets of quadruple-aught buckshot with a pellet diameter of 0.38 inches, which is wider than a 9mm and over half the weight at 84 grains to the 9mm weight of 147 grains. And it's firing 7 at once. That pellet size might sound made up. I assure you it's real. And crazier, this isn't the largest it goes to. It has the fastest fire rate of the 3 in full auto, and it lets you know it, as the recoil can be over double what the other 2 are. So keep a good handle while you ride the lightning. As long as you can do that, you'll keep crowds and elites alike well under control. Next, we have the Faux Ren Mark II. Very much the general purpose of the 3, shooting a literal wall of lead by shooting 21 pellets of single-lot buckshot. This shotgun will shoot 420 pellets in 5 seconds, totaling 2 pounds and 13 ounces of lead thrown at whatever unfortunate son of a bitch that made the mistake of crossing your path. If you wanted to make hamburger meat without a hammer and grinder, this shotgun is for you. The burst rate is the same as the Mark V, and the full auto is slower, giving you more control. This shotgun is suited to sustained fire, so don't count on its burst damage to always stop charging enemies from closing the distance. Lastly, we have the Faux Ren Mark VII. It's a bit of an oddball. First off, it's only burst fire, made for the true Ogryns that don't need a chip to tell them how to work a switch. The burst fire is also flipped. 2 from the hip, 3 while braced. And again, no full auto. Also strange is the number of pellets in these shells. There's only 5, making the pellets 49 caliber. So just short of 50 cal with a grain weight that's comparable to the 357 Magnum. This gun is emptying a revolver cylinder of ammo at you in 1 shot, except it's a 2 or 3 round burst. It's a small wonder that if your enemy survives the first burst, they'll be ass down face up, wondering if Papa Nurgle really does love them if this is his gift. Okay, this last one I almost didn't want to do because it's just ludicrous, but that almost defeats the purpose when talking about Warhammer. So here we go. The Kickback. The Kickback is essentially a 60mm grenade launcher, though at that size, the lexicon has a point in referring to it as a hand mortar, and when you compare it to hand mortars used back then, it tracks. Now, they looked at this grenade launcher and said, hey, instead of committing heresy and inventing a new giant break-open shotgun, let's just give them a really big shotgun shell to put in their grenade launcher. How big? That's a good question. All we know is it can fire 32 pellets, and that's it. The closest thing I can even compare it to is a punt gun. You know, the largest shotgun in existence that isn't a cannon. Let's say this gun is capable of firing what that gun can, which is a pound of shot. Now, for a pound of shot to only have 32 pellets, means these pellets are 50 cal pellets weighed in at half an ounce apiece. 3 of these pellets will carry the same weight you would expect in a 12 gauge Magnum shell, and we're shooting 32. This is just the hacker in Ogryn form. Refer to everything I said to the hacker and apply it to this. Instead, there's only 1 barrel, your Dr. Manhattan, and everyone else is Rorschach. This is peak 40k. Just crank something up to an insane level, and Fatshark, I salute you for it. Not only did you embrace the crazy, but you implemented it in a manner that is not only fun and satisfying to use, but is surprisingly grounded in realism, which was something I didn't expect when I first thought of this video. As a shotgun lover, I always appreciate when a developer makes them as viable as anything else. As for those of you watching, thank you again for joining me on this gun-filled journey. I hope you enjoyed this rabbit hole as much as I did. Like and subscribe as always, and I'll see you next time